rabbi that was a head rabbi in Israel in a specific city. His name was Rabbi Yichiel Bohbot, Zecher Tzadik Levacha, great rabbi of his time, and passed away, I believe, in recent years, if I'm not mistaken. He was actually born in the year 1930. He passed away on the 10th of April in the year 2022. He was a head Sephardi rabbi in an area called Kiryat Shmoneh, and was the head of Macon called the Otzרות, I believe, Gaonim, respectively, over there. It's very interesting. He was actually born in the year 1930. It was a month of May. He was born in, to be precise, on Zion Yar of that specific year. He was born in Morocco in an area called Bnei Malal. He was 91 years of age when he passed away in Jerusalem. I think he's buried in Haram al-Khot. And he would actually make Aliyah, as we can learn about, to Eretz Israel in the year 1966. Interesting enough, so he would be living in Israel for way more than 50 years. And in the now, among his rabbis, we can learn about some of them, include Rav Shlomo Melul, Rabbi Yitzchak Ochana, Rabbi Chaim Yitzchak Haikin, also his wife's name Rabbanit Penina, and his father's name, very interesting enough, I think his father's name was Ranit Satana, if I'm not mistaken, and would be a very famous family in itself. I think his son will become Rabbi Moshe Tzvi Bухבוט, another famous rabbi. He'd go on to become the chief rabbi, I believe, of Kiryat Shmoneh between years 1983 to 1990, in between Rabbi Yitzchak Ochana and Rabbi Shalom Levi, who will be the rabbi of the city itself. Let's explore a few of the highlights of the famous rabbi's life as I'm traveling here from Jerusalem to the city of Beit Shemesh. So he was born in an area called Bnei Malal in Morocco. That came from Moshe and Salanta. He would learn, I think, for 2 years in Yeshiva city where he was born, under auspices of Rav Shlomo Melul. I think we spoke about him on various occasions before. I think it was for 20 years, Heitav Shin Hey and Heitav Shin Vav. And then afterwards he would go on to learn and study in Yeshiva in Mecca, over there, among great rabbanim, including the famous Rabbi Shmuel Chaliva and Rabbi Yitzchak Ochana, respectively, over there. Now, I think it was Kamon Year Heitav Shin Zayin and Heitav Shin Chet. He would actually then go on to he would actually learn under auspices of the famous Rabbi Raphael Baruch Toledano. This was, and Rabbi Shimon Vanona. Now remember, we've spoken about all these great rabbis before here on the series, and I recommend we record nearly 1,500 biographies of different rabbanim of yesteryear. Afterwards, he would actually go on to learn in Casablanca, the famous yeshivat of Sahatorah. And it's interesting, I think Kamodi Heitav Shin Chet, he would go traveling to Paris, to France, and would learn in the yeshivat of Chachmei Tzarfat in an area called Akas La Ben, under auspices of Rabbi Chaim Yitzchak Chaylikia, another great rabbi. I think we did record a video about him afterwards, after he learned there. Morocco. He'd actually returned back to Morocco afterwards. Shemesh Kurosh Ashpoti. He'd actually become a shochet over there and become the rabbi of a kehillah called Chesed Abraham in Casablanca, a very famous place in its own right, and a place obviously we've spoken about maybe about from Casablanca at least, I would assume, in this series. Now come on around the period of 1965, 1966, he would be fortunate enough to make Aliyah to Eretz Israel, who moved to Israel, and he would go learn living in Kiryat, which is quite near me, in the city of Beit Shemesh. And it's actually very interesting. Sham haya achrayt al hakashrut mohel. He would become in Kiryat responsible for kashrut over there, kosher, and also mohel, performing various brit milahs also over there. And I think Kamo Elu in the year 1983, to be precise, in September 1983, he was crowned to become the Sephardi Rabbi of Kiryat Shmoneh, along with another Ashkenazi rabbi, someone named Rabbi Safania Drori, another famous rabbi at the time. He would take over the premiership of Kiryat Shmoneh after Rabbi Yitzchak Ochana was the chief rabbi over there also, respectively, which is very, very interesting. And I think afterwards he would go to Jerusalem, and he would live in the Harnof neighborhood, an area we visited in Israel on several occasions before, and he would learn in the famous kollel over there, Yechemei Israel. Yes, so he, Rabbi David Yosef, is currently the chief rabbi of Israel, the Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel, and he was responsible, I think, part of the kashrut of the Rabbanit Reshit of Israel also, and he actually become the head of the מכון, Otzרות, הגאונים, very interesting now, and would write different writings. I think he would actually write and expound on great drashot, sermons, and writings of the famous Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi, who we've spoken about various occasions for. Friends, anyone tuning in live, please subscribe to the channel. And we've got fantastic content over here of the great rabbis of yesteryear, so please hit the subscribe button and enjoy our amazing content over here. Now it's actually interesting, he actually write within God, also along with the great rabbis of our generation. Among them include Chacham Obadiah Yosef, Rabbi Yoshua Ma'aman, Rabbi Eliyahu Abarjel, Rabbi Shmuel Pinchasi, who's a very great rabbi we've spoken about, and Rabbi Shlomo Moshe Amar, who was the chief rabbi of Jerusalem. I believe he passed away on the 10th of April on Tet Nisan in 2022, this was. And I think afterwards, I think his son sadly passed away a couple of weeks later, Rav Moshe Tzvi, and he was buried in Har Menachot Cemetery in Jerusalem. Now, among his family, we did mention that he would get married to Rabbanit Penina. She was a daughter of Rav Avram Baknin, and they would have 2 sons and 2 daughters. One of them, who we're going to speak about in a few minutes, Rabbi Moshe Tzvi Bohbot, who was a rabbi of Tiberius, if I'm not mistaken, and there was also be responsible with regards to Shut of Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi. Another one of his sons, Rav Avram Bohbot, will become a manager of let's just say a kosher slaughter of Shechita, and very much part of the fabric of the Rabbanut Harishit Yisrael. I think his brother-in-law is Rabbi Yitzchak Fachima, if I'm not mistaken, who's a Rosh Yeshiva and the Shochet of Bekalma in Sarfat, an area in France, respectively. Now he would actually write different great Torah books, if I'm not mistaken, including Reach B'nai, if I'm not mistaken. This was Perushim on the Torah, on the Midrashim of the Chazal, the great rabbis. This in the year Heitavshin Nun Aleph. Kol Techina HaChadash U'Meduyak Le'on Tisha B'Av, if I'm not mistaken. Niseder HaTvilot B'Kinot Nusach Moga U'Metukan B'Tosefet Kilchot U'Manhikim Bi'u L'Haftarat Tisha B'Av, connected to Tisha B'Av on himself, the 9th of Av in itself. I think it would include like some translations and writings on Megillat Eika and Eob. So it's pretty in Jerusalem, I believe. Ktav Yad, if I'm not mistaken, was a Kupet Drashot Rabbanei Mitzrayim HaKadmonim. Very interesting. Be'et Rabbi Yichiel Talmid Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi B'Chamim Nosafim, with regards to those great rabbis. And itself, we'll speak about Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi in the coming minutes. B'Chamim Nosafim Imarot Murim Sham Yosef Bracha. Another one of his Torah works was called the Yisab Bracha. This was contained, let's say, drashot in the Torah on the festivals, and Mitzvach Lesefer Drashot Rabbanei Mitzrayim HaKadmonim. And then there was another book called Sefer Orchot Chaim on the Rosh, which is a biur, let's say, on Yorei Bina, printed in Jerusalem. And another Ktav Yad called the Drushim U'Mamrim, once again connected to Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi, if I'm not mistaken, Yisab Bracha, and the Toldot, the Chronicles of Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi, and Rabbi Moshe Tzvi would very much be responsible about that. So let's explore some of the rabbis he was close to. Included was Rabbi Yitzchak Kohana, who was a rabbi before him in Kiryat Shmona. He was a rabbi, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he lived in 1908 or 1992, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was a rabbi from 1954 for about 24 years in Kiryat Shmona, if I'm not mistaken. His son is Rabbi Yosef Ohana, if I'm not mistaken. Let's explore a bit with regards to him. Rabbi Ohana was actually born in Meknes, and he was very close also to Rabbi Raphael Baruch Toledano. So you can see some of the Talmudim of Rabbi Baruch Toledano would make the imprint on Kiryat Shmona. When he was 25 years of age, I think he was appointed by Rabbi Raphael Berdugo as a Dayan in his Meknes court. He established a yeshiva there, and I think he would emigrate to Eretz Israel in 1948. And would live actually in Jerusalem, despite there was unfortunately bombings at the time, and would live in a German colony in Jerusalem, and he would establish a synagogue over there. I think he would return to Morocco, I think in the early 1950s, at the request of Rabbi Toledano. And very, very interesting to like really mitzchasek the education over there. And I think eventually he would be appointed a rabbi in Kiryat Shmona very, very shortly afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. And the council will bring him in, and he was connected to the Ministry of Religious Affairs over there. And there was another, I think Rabbi Moshe Toledano was also a rabbi there, and he was just seen as a very important rabbi at that point in time. If I'm not mistaken, various different situations he would grapple with Rabbi Ohana in this specific place, and he would dedicate much of his education, his education gearing towards a youth. He would establish a school inside places, independent education places where people could say Tehillim, to study Torah, and where children could earn prizes with regards to Torah studies and so on and so forth. And I think he would retire from the rabbinate eventually in 1978 and move to Jerusalem. That's at that point in time. Rabbi Bohbot would take over from him and become the chief rabbi of the place, I believe. And it's actually interesting, he would study at the Avat Shalom Yeshiva, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it was connected to Yaakov Moshe Hillel from marriage, if I'm not mistaken, and it would also Rabbi Hana was. It's actually a shoe factory, if I'm not mistaken. He was a partner with Rabbi Shlomo Toledano in a shoe making business, if I'm not mistaken. So he was part of a shoe-making business, or a shoe-making factory also, which is just an interesting thing. I think this was before the war that there was over there. Now, another rabbi that Rabbi Bohbot was close to was someone named Rabbi Chaim Yitzchak Chayakin. He lived between 1907 to 1993. He was a Rosh Yeshiva. He was one of the great rabbis in France. I think we spoke about him before. We did a video about him in an area called Akas Laben, if I'm not mistaken. He was born in 1907. He passed away in 1993. I think Chav Dalet Nisan is his Hilula, if I'm not mistaken, just after Pesach. And he would eventually be buried in Bnei Brak, I believe, when he passed away. He was a Rosh Yeshiva of the Chachmei Tzfat in Akas Laben, and he was a rabbi of Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen, if I'm not mistaken. So who was he, basically? He was born in Kosovo, Belarus, very interesting enough. Rabbi Tzvi Chaikin, interesting enough. So we haven't really spoken about rabbis that were connected to Kosovo in its own right. And I think he was close to Rabbi Yitzchak Karelitz. He was close to the Chazon Ish, if I'm not mistaken, or had a connection somehow. He would learn in Yeshivat in Radin, if I'm not mistaken, and he would learn Torah under the auspices of Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen, also the Chafetz Chaim, very, very incredibly. And was close to Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, especially his yeshiva himself. I think, yes, you can see we're going really now to European great territory. 1938, I think he was close to Rabbi Wasserman. And Rabbi Elazar Simcha Wasserman, I think he was living in America at that point in time, and he would then eventually end up in France over there and take on very importance, let's just say, in the Torah learning world in of itself. And I think he passed away, if I'm not mistaken, in Paris, I think in 1993, and he was buried in the cemetery in Ponovich, if I'm not mistaken, in Bnei Brak. So he's another famous rabbi that was connected to him. It's actually interesting, he had many great Talmidim, including Rabbi Aaron Monsonigo, who would go on to become a Rosh Yeshiva, a chief rabbi in Morocco. Rabbi David Natan Shapiro, who will become a head rabbi of the Kelemen Frau Baishi. Rabbi Yichiel Bohbot, who we're speaking about today, who was a rabbi of Kiryat Shmona. Rabbi Yehoshua Barchatz, Rosh Yeshivat Etz Chaim. Rabbi Gabriel Toledano, who will become head of Yeshivat Or Baruch in Jerusalem. Rabbi Raphael Ben Zakan, a Rosh Yeshivat Gila in Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yosef Weizman, Rabbi Yosef Meir, who will become part of the Kolel Chazon Ish. Rav Sholem Chazan, Rosh Mostot Mishkan Meir and Vohole Yaakov Yerushalayim. And Rabbi Avram Amzaleg, who would become the Chasdei David, if I'm not mistaken, Kiryat. Rabbi David Hania, Rosh of the Kehilot of Cronenberg, if I'm not mistaken, between 1988 to around that time period. So let's explore about his son. Rabbi Bohbot had a famous son called Rabbi Moshe Tzvi Baruch Bohbot, another great rabbi of his son. He was born in 1963, he passed away quite recently in 2022, I think around that time period. I think on the 21st of Adar, if I'm not mistaken, it says over here, he passed away. He was a head rabbi, Sephardi rabbi in Tiberius, if I'm not mistaken, and he was actually born himself in Casablanca in 1963. He was about 58 years of age when he passed away, and he's the son of Rabbi Yichiel Bohbot, and who was, obviously we're speaking about today, was Rabbi of Kiryat Shmona, and very, very interesting. He would learn in Yeshivat Torah Or under Rabbi Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg, who we've actually spoken about before. After he got married, he would learn in the Kollel Beit Shmaya and Kollel Chazon Ish. So let's say more Lithuanian education in its own right. And he would be appointed, he would receive a rabbinic diploma and a Dayan. He would become Dayanut, and he would become the Rosh Beit Midrash Gavoa of the Dayanim and the Rabbanim of the Chilkat Mochokek. Very interesting. I think Bnei Brak, if I'm not mistaken, and was Rosh Kollel of teaching Choshen Mishpat in Elad, a place we visited in Channel on many occasions. I think Lachar Pitzerato shel Rav David Peretz, he was appointed on the 20, or maybe on the 2nd of Kislev in 2017, 20th of November, as a rabbi of the city of Tiberius, a very prominent position, if I'm not mistaken. So that's very interesting. So he would also write various Torah books, including Pnei Yam al Sugyot Hashas. This was printed in Bnei Brak, and Yamin Moshe al Pesachim. This was printed in Tafshin Ayin Zayin of itself. And he was also responsible with regards to Shut Rabbeinu Betzel Ashkenazi, Betzel Chachma, which is printed in Bnei Brak, and the Minchat Kohen of Rabbi Avram HaKohen in Matal, which includes Kuntras, let's say, the Sherei Da'at and Yorei De'ah, respectively. Anyone tuning in live, please subscribe to the channel as we are exploring the history of great rabbis' life over here on our community. So please, everyone, welcome and enjoy the great content. And don't forget to subscribe now, and you'll get so much great content. Another rabbi he was close to is Rabbi Shalom Levi. He was born in 1956, and if I'm not mistaken, he passed 2022 in August. He was a rabbi. He was a more identified community. He was also a rabbi in Kiryat Shmona between 1995 to 2022. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Abraham Elkanah and Kahana Shapiro, if I'm not mistaken, also. And very, very interesting. Let's say a word within regards to him. He was a famous rabbi. He was part of the Yeshivat Yamit and Yeshivat Merkaz Harav also. And his wife's name, I think, is Rabbanit Chava, just to point out. So very, very interesting. He'd be a rabbi for 27 years in Kiryat Shmona, the third head rabbi over there of that city. He was born in Morocco also. And he would learn in Yeshivat Yamit, Yeshivat Merkaz Harav when he came to Israel. And he was actually ordained to the rabbinate himself, and would live in Mitzvah Yericho, if I'm not mistaken, and become a head rabbi in Kiryat Shmona in 1995, along with the Ashkenazi rabbi at the time, Rabbi Tzefania Drori, and he would set up kollel there. He would work in kashrut also, and dealing with things like kashrut lamahedrin and heter mehira in himself. And he suffered from a bad illness before he passed away, and he passed away, I think he was about 66 years of age. He was married to Rabbanit Chava, I think, and they had 8 children. If I have 8 children, if I'm not mistaken now. One of his sons is Rabbi Itamar Levi, who was a rabbi of the congregation and Rosh Kollel in Kiryat Shmona, and his chatan is Rabbi Yichiel Ben Chamo, who was a rabbi of Kihilat Beit Rambam, if I'm not mistaken, I think in Modi'in, and author of a big blog out there, spreading Torah, let's just say. And his cousin, I think, is Rabbi Moshe Dadon, who's a rabbi of Moshav Aderet also. So that's another interesting tidbit over here. Now, there would be many writings on the famous Rabbi Bezalel Ashkenazi. Let's say a word with regards to Rabbi Ashkenazi. At the moment, he was a famous rabbi of his time. He was a famous Shluchei de Rabbanan. He was lived between 1520 to 1594. He was a rabbi in both Jerusalem and in Egypt. And the author of the Shitat Mekubetzet, if I'm not mistaken, he was living in Ottoman Empire at that point in time, in both Israel and Egypt. If I'm not mistaken, he was a Parshan with the Talmud, with the Gemara, and a Posek. He was rendering different Jewish laws in of itself. Not just the Shita Mekubetzet, he wrote a Safat Zekenim on the Mesechtot on the Talmud, and Sefer Klalei HaTalmud, and he would write other works with regards to Shelot, Shuvot, question and answers, with sermons, let's just say, in of itself. His rabbis, Rabbi Ashkenazi's rabbis, include Rabbi David Ben Zmira, the famous Radbaz, and Rabbi Yisrael Kor'ael. You can see really great rabbis he was in. And his Talmidim included Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, Rabbi Shlomo Adani, the famous rabbi. He was a famous Perush he would do on the Mishnah, or the Melechet Shlomo, and he lived at time period of Rabbi Yisrael Najara, we have to point out over here. So let's explore a bit with regards to Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi. Obviously lived in Ottoman Israel during the 16th century, and is best known obviously for the Shitat Mekubetzet, which is a commentary on the Talmud, and you can see the great Talmudim he had. He was one of the leading Eastern Talmudists of his time and rabbis of his day. And it's most likely he was born in the land of Israel, and most of his life was spent in Egypt, in the Eilat area over there. He received his Talmudic education from a famous Rabbi David ben Solomon ibn Abi Zimra, and Rabbi Israel ben Meir di Kuria, interestingly enough. And he was regarded as one of the highest authorities in the Orient, and counted Rabbi Isaac Luria and Rabbi Solomon Adeni among his pupils. Now, I think in Egypt, his reputation was such that he, let's say, had the dignity of the Nagid over there, which had existed for centuries and had gradually, let's say, deteriorated into more of an aristocratic privilege. In 1587, I think robust debates would occur in Jerusalem over the extent to which scholars not engaged in business should contribute to the taxes paid by the Jewish community to the Pasha. And Rabbi Ashkenazi, together with several other rabbis, took a stand that Jewish scholars, being usually impelled by love alone to immigrate to the land of Israel, let's just say, and being scarcely able to support themselves, should be relieved from taxes. That was his opinion. I think in the same year Rabbi Ashkenazi travelled to the land of Israel. He settled in Jerusalem. He was recognised as important both in the Sephardic and Ashkenazi communities. The conditions at that point in time in Jerusalem were more critical, and obviously he had huge influence, let's just say, that the congregations of the city were not dissolved. I think German Jews, who normally did not recognise the jurisdiction of the Sephardi on it, and who, let's say, being largely scholars, refused to pay the Jews' tax, nevertheless recognised Rabbi Ashkenazi's authority. However, this arrangement between the Ashkenazi was solely due to the personal influence more of Rabbi Ashkenazi, as Vit ended immediately after he passed away. Now, what was a Shita Mekubetzet, which Rabbi Bohbot would expound on and do writings on in itself? This was a gathering, let's just say, of various interpretations, a collection of glosses on the greater part of the Talmud in the style, let's say, of Tosafot. And let's just say the great value of the Shita lies principally in the fact that it contains numerous excerpts from the Talmudic commentaries which have not otherwise been preserved. Now, I think Rabbi Ashkenazi himself wrote only short marginal annotations in his edition of the Talmud. Now, Rabbi Solomon Adeni, his student, edited the annotations into the commentary of Kadoshim, or Kodashim, which I think still exists today with a vast quantity of original material, we have to point out. The Shita Mekubetzet itself, let's say, contains expositions of the Talmud taken from the work of other great Spanish rabbis, including Nachmanides, Rabbi Ben Aderet, Rabbi Yom Tov of Seville, and from famous French rabbis, including Rabbi Avram Ben David, Rabbi Baruch Ben Samuel, Rabbi Isaac of Chinon. And the study of the Shita is particularly valuable for understanding Tosafot, because the work contains some of the older and unedited Tosafot. There's glosses of Rav Asher ben Yechiel and of disciples of Peretz ben Eliyahu, which are particularly contained in it. Now, he'd write other works, Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi, a collection of responsa, which I think appeared after he passed away in Venice in the year 1595, interestingly enough. So I think his methodology of Talmud and his marginal notes to Jerusalem Talmud are still extant at the time of the Chida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulay, and are preserved, I think, currently in manuscript at Jerusalem, which is very, very interesting to point out. So very, very interesting that he was speaking about a famous rabbi of his time, Rabbi Betzalel, and we were saying about Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi was a rabbi which the Bухbots who we're speaking about today would really, really expound on his brilliance in Shas in of itself, and he was really just a great rabbi in its own right, and had connections, as I say, with the Jewish communities in Syria, in Damascus, and various other places also. And he passed away in 1592, and I don't know if we actually know where he was actually buried. I think it's reported over. So friends, everyone, today we were recording about a famous rabbi from Israel, we've spoken about various occasions before, Rabbi Yichiel Bohbot, in this special series over here. And we are a community, friends, as we're exploring about great rabbis, famous rabbis, yesteryear over here. if you descend from any of the great rabbis we're speaking about, please send me an email. And let me know. And Rabbi Yichiel Bohbot, I'm going to let you see some scenes over here of Bet Shemesh and enjoy a few scenes as a special treat. Shalom everyone. How's it going? How you been? Yeah, you every 6 time here. Baruch Hashem. Was it Hilula today or Rabbi Bוחbot?
Sorry?
Was it Hilula of Rabbi Bוחbot today? Or yesterday? Of your grandfather was yesterday. And 4 days ago was Rabbi Rachman. 4 days ago was Rabbi Rachman. Yeah.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah, take care. Okay, very interesting, friends. Over here we did a special edition. We spoke about the famous Rabbi Yichiel Bohbot over here on his very special edition, who was a chief rabbi of at his time in Kiryat Shmona, which is a really, really prominent position. It's a rabbi we've spoken about here on various occasions before inside this series. And we do fantastic content here on this channel. We don't just record videos, historic biography videos of great rabbis. We also tour all around Jerusalem. And today we took lots of film all over Yerushalayim, all over Bet Shemesh, different places, so on and so forth, which is very, very inspirational, and doing so many other great things. We also, what is special about our channel is we record videos with great rabbis of current days, the most inspirational people also. So that's something that very much have to stress over, and we are very much proud about, and so on and so forth. So just recording this over here. We also did speak about Rabbi Yichiel Bohbot's son and some of the rabbis he was also connected to in his day, and very, very interesting, as we love to explore about the great rabbis, and we're like an online, let's just say, more an encyclopedia. We've got this encyclopedia in of its own right, where we're exploring the various, who are the important rabbis, the great rabbis all over. We concentrate mostly on the Eidut Mizrach countries, such as let's say Morocco, various parts of the Ottoman countries in its own right, Syria, Iran, parts of Israel, Eretz Israel in its own right, North Africa, Asia, and one of the few places. There we go. Just leave you some scenes over here with this beautiful area, and wish you all a fantastic day, friends. Over here, nothing like Israel over here. Just by a beautiful park over here in Israel, as we just enjoy Israel, friends. So wish you all a great day, and thanks for watching.